come and just experience it. And luckily, I've had 3 days before today, which I've spent just loving it. I mean, I'm not sure about this part of Bangkok, this new Bangkok that's being constructed all around us, but I just love being down on the streets. It's extraordinary atmosphere. So I suppose I've got probably, you know, when we start moving into philosophy, I'm a bit more Oriental than I am Western, I think. That's what, in a strange way, 12 Monkeys was about. It's about the cyclical as opposed to the linear to perfection view of the world. And so there's all of that. And you know, culturally, artistically, I'm astonished by it because I can't quite work it out. That's what I like about it. And I see these elaborate, ornate designs. My brain doesn't quite understand how they are and how they grew. And that intrigues me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Some more questions?
Yeah, I have a question for this gentleman. Okay, you mentioned the word underground. I want to know if there's an underground culture, past or present, that is relevant to your philosophy or your work.
Oh, that's the problem. I think it's like comic books. The problem is comic books have started to become respectable, and they should never be. Comic books should always be underground as far as I'm concerned. The really good ones. I mean, there's plenty of comic books that are just enjoyable, but the ones that have made are the ones that are not respectable, the ones that aren't being made into films, basically. He was really special. My last memory of Viv was falling asleep in front of 2 big speakers in my house at a party. Just, oh boy! Anyway, but if you get a chance, go on the web, dig up the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band and start listening to their music. It's wonderful stuff.
And Neil Innes' stuff, like the Ruddles.
Yeah, well, Neil did the Ruddles, and Neil was always in a sense, the 7th male Python. Because when we did the stage shows, Neil was involved in all of those.
One last question, I'm sorry, filibuster. I've also read a book about George Harrison, and you made a lovely quote when he passed on, and you said that when you went to Friar Park, it was like life was worth living. It was like entering another realm.
Yeah.
Friar Park being George's place.
Yeah, just a word about George. God bless him.
George Harrison was just, he wasn't the quiet Beatle. That's what I've never understood why people thought that. He would never stop talking once he got started. He was funny, he was incredibly funny. He was a huge...
incredibly important to the Pythons because he financed...
he saved our ass, basically, because... Yeah, I know. When Life of Brian was about to start, we were heading off to Tunisia, and we were going on the Saturday with the crew, and we were off and running. And on the Thursday, Lord Bernard Delfont of EMI, who were putting up the money at that point, I think he finally read the script and thought it was blasphemous. And they pulled the plug, literally 3 days before we were to leave. And it was only because George was probably the biggest Python fan on the planet. He knew every sketch backwards and forwards. We'd become friends with him. And Eric Idle said, we got a problem. And George says, well, count on me. And literally he mortgaged this huge place in Cadogan Square in Knightsbridge. And they put up the money for Life of Brian, and that's how it got made. We've been really lucky again because with Holy Grail, with Mind Jabberwocky, with Life of Brian, with Time Bandits, those were all financed effectively by musicians, by pop stars. And that's why we're able to get away with the things we got away with long before we had to then go with our begging bowls to Hollywood.
And interesting, you know, because a lot of people think the indie movement started around 1990 and Sundance and Soderbergh and all that, but these are really indie pictures.
Totally. I mean,
preceding that.
Yeah, well, Holy Grail was Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Elton John, who else was in there? Chrysalis Records, Island Records. They put up the money. It was actually not because they did like us, they did like that, but the tax situation in London at that point was so horrendous that if you made huge amounts of money like those people were making, you could pay 90% tax, 9-0. You were left with 10%, and so we were basically a tax dodge. That's what we really were.
Animation type stuff, the drawings and putting found objects into the frame.
Yeah, I mean, I was always lazy, and if somebody could do half the drawing for me, and they were dead, it helped enormously. And it was free, exactly. So, you know, my good friends Albrecht Dürer, Peter Bruegel, and all the other great artists I would steal from. But it did lead to my first real job in the movie industry, because I went to night school. There was a film night school in New York. I think I lasted less than a month, 4 sessions, because I just didn't like all the ambitious, the driven people were getting the equipment, and the people that were more sensitive were being trampled. So I got bored with that and quit, and got a job which I worked for free in a studio that did animated cigarette packs for commercials and things, dancing things. So it was all stop motion work. And I said, I just want to be near the equipment. I wanted to understand what this stuff is. And so that was how it began. And that was the extent of my training, because film school is something, except for those 4 sessions, I've avoided. And I think all filmmakers should, frankly.
Maybe this is